Hi, everybody. I'm here with Amy Wood, and we're talking recruiter enablement. Amy, thanks for joining me today. Give us a quick introduction to you and your background.
Sure, thanks, Adam. So I currently am the Senior Director of Talent Operations and Programs at OneTrust. And historically, I really started my career and grew up as a recruiter. I started in agency recruiting, moved in-house at HubSpot in 2013, started recruiting for BDRs and kind of entry-level sales roles, moved into the tech space. At HubSpot, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to start their first recruiting operations team and really build that out at a time where we were scaling very rapidly, and really needed that additional support for recruiting, where previously, recruiters were just doing everything themselves. Data and data programs, enablement, all of that. Technology, trying to figure it out themselves. So that was really fun to build out. And then I was also really fortunate at HubSpot to get the chance to lead an internal software team that was more on the technical side of recruiting and general G&A internal software. So that was great. I then went to GEM and started their first recruiting operations team as well. And since then, I made the move to OneTrust about 4 months ago, and we're also in a very similar space where we're building and starting to put enablement into place. So it's been a really, really great ride so far.
Yeah. Let's talk about HubSpot specifically. So I imagine when you were building out all the different things you were doing in recruiter enablement, we'll come on to tactics and things later, but I imagine that HubSpot was probably already pretty sophisticated around things like DevOps and sales operations and things like that. So was there anything that you could learn that was already in place from your sales enablement colleagues or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So DevOps definitely was pretty sophisticated at that point, as was sales operations. So I was fortunate because I was recruiting for that team when I first started to have built
Yes.
a relationship with the sales ops team. And actually, our VP of sales ops kind of became a mentor to me as I moved into that space. And I'll never forget, he warned me against it as I was building out this team. He was like, do you want to do all of the work and have none of the glory? In which case, sure, operations is for you. But yeah, learning from them in terms of, it's a very similar process, right? So sales and recruiting, they have a lot of similarities. There's a lot of differences too. I personally think recruiting tends to be a more difficult job to have because we're dealing with people, and people can change their minds, and there's a lot of changes that happen there. But the basics are the same, right? There's a funnel you have to work people through, and a lot of the overlaps are there. And I think fundamentally the idea that we want our sales reps, and companies know this intrinsically, but we want our sales reps to spend as much time as possible on calls with customers and prospects, right? And we do everything we possibly can for sales to make sure we're protecting their time in that space, right? It's the same way we manage engineers, where it's like we reduce meetings, we make sure that they have focus time. Like, what do we need to do to support them to, give them time to do the core job that they're hired for? And with recruiting, that's kind of a relatively new concept, right? I think recruiters have been asked to do, yes, fill roles and hire, but also all of this other surround sound work. And a lot of it's highly manual and not
Yes.
super automated. So, taking some of I think it was an easy way to sell, the fact that we needed to invest in this part of the company when we compare it to sales, right? When we say, like, you don't ask your sales reps to do all of this extra surround sound work, right? You have
Yes.
teams of people that do that. that was the way that it was like, that was the best way where things started to click. And it was like, oh yeah, of course, we need to make sure that the recruiters are spending more time in the funnel talking to candidates. And that's really the goal.
Yes. So I think what you just said, you could replace the word sales with recruiter in everything that you just said, I think, around sales enablement and recruiter enablement. Okay.
Absolutely.
I I don't actually think there's any differences other than maybe in the area of assessment. But again, you could connect that to in on sales. The parallel would be like pre-sales qualification, that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
there's a parallel in there as well. Okay, what are some of the things that you think are important for people to be doing when it comes to recruiter enablement?
Yeah. So the place that enablement kind of encapsulates a lot of different things, right? It's how do we help people do their jobs, basically? Like how do we help support them in doing their jobs as a high level for me? And I think where I typically start when I'm coming into a new company or looking at, anything net new is outlining the existing process. So what's happening today and, where are the bottlenecks, right? Like
Yeah.
what is slowing us down? And frankly, I look a lot at like what is manual. So what are recruiters doing that's a highly manual process requiring them to like, move data from one place to another, do manual data entry or send a manual email, things like that. And how do we automate that throughout the process? And how do we kind of build around that so that the day-to-day work that recruiters are doing just gets easier. They have less kind of business interruptions and they can focus on really just talking to candidates and working them through the funnel. So that's the first thing. And then the other aspect I think is, training and upskilling and, and learning and helping to ensure that, what often happens before you kind of put enablement in terms of training in place is you find that like first of all things are not happening consistently across your team, right? There's recruiters in this area that are doing things one way and recruiters over here that are doing things a different way, um, and with varying results. So part of this is you know really like harnessing the knowledge that recruiters have themselves and just making sure we're sharing it across the team, because at the end of the day, they're really the experts, right? Like I'm not the expert in how to close a candidate necessarily, right? Nor should I be. It's the recruiters that have that, and some of it is just kind of matching up the skill sets and making sure that we're um, even utilizing some of our existing resources on the team to help train and share knowledge across the team. Um, and then it's really about scaling that. So it's about kind of getting that in place and then putting that in a place where there's scale, where you have, an onboarding plan and you have upskilling and you have hiring manager training and interviewer training and all of this so that, there's just a process that you repeat over and over again.
Okay. Let's talk about the like knowledge sharing. What are the things that we can do to enable that, to make that recruiters are often they're kind of brought up as lone wolves. So, it's not necessarily natural to collaborate and share. How do we make that happen more intuitively or more naturally?
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I think also intrinsically, a lot of recruiters are pretty competitive, right? Like that's one of the genes that we look
Yeah.
for, similar to salespeople, right? Where
Yeah.
there is that competitive drive. I think the ways that I've seen this work in the past, and what I've noticed is that, if you're recruiting and that's your main job and it's been your main job for years, it tends to get a little repetitive at the end of the
Yes.
day, right? Like
Yeah.
it is this muscle that you've built, and then it tends to get a little bland if you're doing that, over and over and over again. So what I found is that a lot of recruiters actually crave this work to be able to do, like, actually, how do I step outside my day to day for a portion of time? Maybe it's 20% of their time, 10%, whatever it is, and, work on projects, work on, some form of enablement. So there is that, like, I think they naturally crave that because it is very competitive at the end of the day, or repetitive at the end of the day, I should say.
Yeah.
So all of that I think is helpful. And then, typically what I've seen happen is that, we've done everything from little exercises where, kind of you share a strength and a weakness, and then you match yourself up with someone else that may, their weakness is your strength. And, you have kind of cross collaborative conversations that way.
Yeah.
All the way to like partnering and frankly, on the ops side, we don't roll out or do anything without partnering with the recruiters because that helps with change management and buy-in. So anything we're doing, like the people that are going to be impacted at the end of this, they have a seat at the table from like the initial part of the project, so they can voice their opinion, and so we get earlier buy-in. And I think all of that really helps with how we're building out, an enablement program and a training program. So I think those are kind of the key places I would start.
Okay, one last one that we haven't really covered, but I'm interested to know your perspective. Recruitment is, when I started, everything I did pretty much was achieving influence using my voice. And today, recruiters are using different channels, different types of media formats. They need to write things, they need to use images and videos and all sorts of other like collateral content assets and things to achieve influence with candidates and with hiring managers. Is there an area of enablement which facilitates this better?
Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point, I think it's bonkers that when I was starting out in an agency, we used to pick up the phone and call people. That's like terrifying to me now thinking back about that. But so I think absolutely what I would say is there are, first and foremost, your applicant tracking system is no longer enough, right? Like that's most often not everything you need and not like what we would call a full tech stack at this point.
Yeah.
I think things like a CRM on top or in conjunction with your ATS is like table stakes at this point. As is, better or worse, like a LinkedIn recruiter license, that's pretty much table stakes at this point as well. Um, and then, things like scheduling automation, I think are pretty, pretty table stakes. And what I've seen is that, again, if we think about our overarching recruiting process, anything that can be automated throughout that process, we really should think about automating. And the benefit of that is that, we're reducing the load on recruiters. So what once was, really pick up the phone and call people until they answer you, and then moved into, follow up manually. So if you're trying to reach somebody or reach out to someone, you're sending them an email, you're setting yourself a reminder, you're sending them another email, and you're writing these out every single time. To now, automating that process where you're putting people into a sequence or workflow, again, similarly to how sales operates now. Like sales does not operate without, some form of CRM, either like a Salesforce or HubSpot or something similar. So all of that, I think, is just like absolutely necessary. The fact that, we shouldn't have recruiters doing any of that manually. And the benefit is like, we can actually have more control over the messaging that goes out and be able to test better. So, we're doing A/B testing with messages to see, what actually resonates better with candidates or with prospects. And that information we can kind of feed back into the funnel as well, so that we're getting better results in the long run. Um, and then alternatively, I also think that there are some really interesting tools popping up, like Bright Hire, for example, which that actually feeds so well back into our enablement conversation because, oftentimes when we're teaching people how to interview and how to analyze talent, we're talking theoretically, right? We're not giving them like hard examples of this is a good question, this is a good answer, or this is like a not so good answer. And some of these tools that allow for you to basically record and take snippets from interviews. It reduces the time to fill out scorecards. It reduces like the back and forth and debriefs that we have. And we're able to take those snippets and kind of use that in our enablement as well, which I think is hugely helpful. So all of that kind of feeds into other aspects, and really just makes all of our lives easier.
Yeah, no, I agree. Something like Bright Hire is a perfect example of a modern recruiter enablement technology that we should be making use of. I think, yeah, typing out notes after an interview is something that doesn't happen. So if it doesn't need to happen, then that's really great. Amy, you've covered a lot of really useful insights with us today. So thank you very much for your time. I've enjoyed talking to you and looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam.